The silence of the 45th floor of Castellan Corp was heavy and oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic squeak of my mop against the polished marble. It was 3:17 a.m. My body ached with a dull, persistent exhaustion that had become my permanent shadow since the death of my brother 6 months ago. My name is Ethan Hart, and I am an Omega with a secret, or rather a priority, tucked away safely at home, Charlie. My nephew, a bright-eyed boy who turns 7 months old next week, is the reason I drag myself through the echoing halls of power every night. He's also the reason for the cold knot of panic currently twisting in my stomach. I paused by a row of obsidian black executive desks, leaning on the mop handle, pulling my phone from the pocket of my worn coveralls. Even the dim light of the screen felt too bright in this vast, sterile space. My hand shook slightly as I navigated to my banking app $17.34. That was the grim reality. The rent was looming, sure, but that wasn't the immediate life-or-death crisis. The crisis was the formula. Charlie has a severe, rare allergy to cow's milk protein and most common substitutes. The only thing his little body can tolerate is a specialized, medically prescribed omega milk compound called neocasein. It's a miracle drug, but it costs a fortune. The last tin, which was already too small, was currently sitting almost empty on my counter, enough for maybe 2 more feedings. I had calculated every penny, worked every extra shift the agency offered, but somehow the cost had outpaced me again. I needed money, and I needed it now. There was only one person I could even attempt to ask: Marcus, my old friend and fellow Omega. Marcus worked 2 jobs, but he was always kind, and he knew Charlie's situation. My scent patch, designed to mask the soft lavender and vanilla scent that always accompanies my exhaustion, felt heavy and scratchy on my neck. I wished I could just let my true scent signal my desperation, but here, in the cold heart of the Castellan Corporation, I was invisible. A ghost. A cleaner. I opened the messaging app, my thumb hovering over Marcus's contact. I took a deep, shaky breath, formulating the most humble, least demanding way to ask for a loan of $500. Marcus, hey. I know this is super late. Neocasein emergency. Could you possibly spot me $500 until my next full check? I promise I'll pay you back double overtime next week. Charlie needs it desperately. I hesitated, wanting to delete the last line, afraid it sounded too dramatic, too pathetic. But it was the truth. He did need it desperately. I tapped send. I sighed, rubbing my eyes. The exhaustion must have been worse than I thought, because only a minute later, my phone vibrated, not with a reply from Marcus, but with a text message from an unknown number, followed immediately by 2 notifications from my banking app. Incoming deposit, $1,000. I froze, staring at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden, frantic rhythm against the quiet corporate hum. $1,000. It was double what I asked for. The message was curt, almost cold, yet undeniably generous. Who? Did Marcus get a raise? Did he think $500 wasn't enough? But the number, it wasn't Marcus. I quickly tapped the message, checking the contact information linked to the number. The name flashed on the screen, causing a shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Adrian Castellan. Adrian Castellan, the Alpha CEO. The man whose office I was currently standing outside, the legendary, impossibly handsome, and notoriously terrifying untouchable Alpha. How in the hell did I send that message to him? I scrolled back through my contacts list in a blinding panic. I'd saved his number months ago under Castellan Corp emergency line, after a pipe burst in the basement, and I needed to report it directly to management. The number was just 1 digit off from Marcus's personal cell. In my sleep-deprived haze, I hadn't noticed the difference. My hands started sweating inside my gloves. I had just sent a desperate, pathetic plea for money to the most powerful, most ruthless man in the entire company. A man known for firing people for using the wrong type of pen, let alone for begging. I glanced over at the sleek mahogany door of the executive suite, feeling a sudden urge to flee the building and never look back. He was probably still in there. The lights were always on, even at this hour. He didn't reply to my question. He didn't ask for details. He didn't tell me to get lost or threaten to fire me. He just sent $1,000. A complicated mix of shame, relief, and sheer terror washed over me. I had the money. Charlie was safe for another 2 weeks, maybe 3, if I rationed carefully. But now, I was indebted to Adrian Castellan. A debt I couldn't possibly repay, Not just the money, but the sheer awkwardness of the interaction. I quickly typed a frantic response, my fingers stumbling over the keys. "Mr. Castellan, I am so sorry. That was a mistake. I sent that to the wrong person. Please, let me pay you back. I am just a cleaner here. I had no right." I stared at the screen, waiting for the devastating reply. The cold, logical rejection. The order to report to HR tomorrow morning. Nothing. I put my phone away and gripped the mop handle tightly, forcing myself back into the routine. The $1,000 felt like a searing burn in my pocket. Adrian Castellan, the alpha who wouldn't let anyone touch him, had reached out, not with a hand, but with an act of devastating, impersonal generosity. And now I had to work in his proximity every night, cleaning the floor beneath the feet of the man who had just saved my nephew's life. The $1,000 sat in my bank account like a glowing, untouchable stone. It solved my immediate problem. Charlie was fed, his formula stock replenished, but it created a far more agonizing social one. I was indebted, not just financially, but emotionally, to a man who existed on a plane so far above me that our interaction felt like a surreal glitch in the Matrix. For the next 3 nights, I obsessively sought a way to repay him, or at least properly thank him. I rehearsed my speech in the empty corridors. "Mr. Castellan, I truly appreciate your generosity, but I must return this. I am committed to earning my own way." It sounded stiff and ridiculous, especially when addressed to an office door. Adrian Castellan was famously inaccessible. During the day, he was surrounded by layers of staff, security, and the impenetrable shield of his alpha aura. At night, when I worked, he was often still here, but locked away in his executive suite. His light was a constant beacon of relentless productivity, or perhaps profound loneliness. My routine changed. I couldn't help but be hyper-aware of his presence. I would linger near his mahogany door, pretending to meticulously wipe down the nearby art display or polish the fire extinguisher cabinet. I noticed patterns. He never ordered takeout. There was never any evidence of outside food. He often wore the same crisp, bespoke suit for what looked like 36 hours straight. And most strikingly, he never left his office without his coat buttoned tightly, even when the floor was sweltering. It was a barrier, a defense mechanism made of expensive wool. Then, on the 4th night, I saw him. I was cleaning the small, secondary conference room adjacent to his private office, pretending to dust a bookshelf, when I heard the low click of his door opening. My blood ran cold. I immediately shrank back, hoping the shadows and my plain gray uniform made me invisible. He wasn't fully dressed. He wore a simple, dark undershirt and tailored trousers. The air around him was different without the armor of his suit. He looked impossibly tired, his shoulders slumped, and the sharp angles of his face seemed carved out by exhaustion. He moved quickly, almost furtively, towards the private wet bar tucked into the corner of the small reading lounge. He pulled out a small, metallic medical kit I hadn't noticed before. He placed it on the counter, his movements precise and practiced. Curiosity, a reckless and dangerous instinct, overpowered my fear. I craned my neck around the bookshelf. I saw him prepare a syringe, not a large, frightening one, but a slim, delicate needle, and sterilize a spot on his upper arm. His breath hitched, a small, involuntary sound of anticipation or dread. He pressed the needle in. As the liquid was injected, I saw his body tense dramatically. His back arched slightly, and a faint sheen of sweat instantly covered his brow, even in the cool air. It was a reaction to pain, sharp and immediate, but he endured it, his jaw locked tight. It was over in seconds. He quickly capped the syringe, packed the kit away, and swallowed several small, white pills from a pillbox. I gasped. It was barely a whisper, a tiny puff of air, but in the oppressive silence of the executive floor, it sounded like a gunshot. Adrian Castellan froze. His head snapped up, eyes, the color of chilled silver, locking instantly onto mine. My training immediately took over. I dropped the dusting cloth and stood straight, ready for the inevitable fury. "Mr. Castellan, I apologize. I was just finishing the dusting. I didn't mean to intrude." I kept my voice low and neutral, but my heart was a frantic captive bird. He didn't yell. He didn't fire me. He simply stared, the silver in his eyes deepening into something akin to hurt. He walked towards me, slowly, carefully, keeping a sterile distance of about 10 feet. "You saw that," he stated, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that rarely left his office. It held none of the alpha dominance I expected, only resignation. I only saw you taking your medicine, sir. I'll forget I ever saw it. He gave a dry, humorless laugh. You won't. And I can't let you pretend you did. He ran a hand through his perfectly groomed hair, suddenly looking less like a CEO and more like a man pushed to his breaking point. What you saw, Mr. Hart, is the routine. The medication dulls the effect, but it never stops it entirely. He paused, his gaze fixed on my face, searching for a reaction. I have touch aversion syndrome. TAS. I blinked, processing the clinical term. I'm not familiar, sir. He explained, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, as if reading from a medical journal. It's a neurological condition. My nervous system is hypersensitive. Any physical contact, even a brush of skin, sends a violent, debilitating wave of pain through my body. It's a full-body seizure response, often resulting in injury. My shock must have been visible. An alpha, a dominant Castellan, crippled by the simplest act of touch? It was unthinkable in the omegaverse dynamic. It started when I was a child, he continued, the flatness in his tone finally cracking, revealing a razor-thin edge of pain. My stepfather, an alpha, used touch as a weapon. His abuse was consistent. My body built a physical mechanism to protect myself from ever feeling human contact again. The pain is worse than the abuse ever was, but it works. I can't be touched, so I can't be hurt. The sudden weight of his vulnerability, his horrifying secret, hit me with more force than any alpha scent could. The cold, ruthless CEO was just a terrified boy trapped inside a fortress of his own making. The $1,000 transfer, the curt text, it wasn't indifference. It was the only way he knew how to interact, impersonal, safe, and distant. I need you to understand, he said, his voice hardening slightly. You cannot, under any circumstances, attempt to touch me. You can't even step too close. It's not aggression, Ethan. It is survival. The use of my first name was an unintentional intimacy, a tiny crack in the fortress wall. My fear had been replaced by a profound, heartbreaking wave of empathy. I didn't see the untouchable alpha anymore. I saw a lonely man, isolated by trauma. I understand, Mr. Castellan, I whispered, holding his gaze steadily. I would never put you through that. And thank you. For Charlie. I truly needed that. He merely nodded, a gesture of dismissal, already turning back toward the seclusion of his office, the secret now shared, the walls briefly lowered, but the distance between us still vast and unyielding. After the revelation, the atmosphere on the 45th floor didn't just feel silent, it felt sacred. Adrian Castellan's secret wasn't a weakness. It was a profound, agonizing wound, and I, Ethan Hart, a night shift cleaner, was the only person in the building, perhaps outside his immediate family, who knew the depth of his isolation. My fear of him was entirely replaced by a protective, almost reverent caution. I meticulously measured the distance between us, ensuring I never breached the 10-foot perimeter he had established as his boundary of survival. I realized the coldness I had perceived in him was not malice, but simply a defense mechanism. He wasn't untouchable because he was arrogant. He was untouchable because the world hurt him. I continued to work, but my purpose shifted. I still needed the money for Charlie, but now a small, reckless part of me felt compelled to offer comfort, even if it had to be from a distance. The change started small. I noticed that Adrian often worked until 5 a.m., fueled only by whatever black coffee the automated machine dispensed. One night, I brought my thermos. It held my usual lavender and vanilla-infused omega tea, but I had made a separate, high-quality batch of pure Kona blend. The good stuff Marcus had given me as a birthday gift. I placed the porcelain mug, which I had sanitized meticulously, on the corner of his sprawling desk, far from his work zone, alongside a small, individually wrapped, dark chocolate square. I made sure to leave them well before his anticipated break time, guaranteeing no risk of accidental proximity. The next morning, the items were gone. The mug was sitting clean by the sink in his private washroom. On the third night of my small ritual, I found something waiting for me. Tucked under the coffee coaster was a small, formal note card. The coffee is superior to the automated machine. I believe you have misplaced your jacket hook. Adrian C. The note was curt, almost transactional, but the mention of the jacket hook, a small piece of metal I'd been using to organize cleaning supplies, showed he was observing me, just as I was observing him. He noticed the details. My heart gave a nervous flutter. This was my chance to establish contact, to show him I wasn't scared of his truth. I couldn't speak to him, but I could write. I tore off a piece of a clean, lined notepad sheet, much less formal than his card, and wrote back simply, "I am glad you enjoyed it, Mr. Castellan. Please don't worry about the hook. It was just a spare. Yh." The next night, his reply was waiting. It was on the back of my original note, written in his precise, commanding script. "It is Adrian, and it is not customary for the cleaning staff to purchase high-grade Kona coffee for the CEO." Why Ethan? He used my name again. My first name. I felt a blush creep up my neck, visible only to me under the harsh office lights. I sat down on a stool in the darkened conference room and thought about my answer. He wanted honesty, and given his history, I couldn't offer anything less. "Because you gave me $1,000 without asking why. And because you are here every night alone. A good alpha deserves a decent cup of coffee to get through the night." Yh. The notes became our bridge. Over the following weeks, our late-night correspondence evolved from curt acknowledgments into quiet, meaningful conversations. They were stilted at first. He would write about the pressure of the upcoming merger, the impossibility of trust in his executive circle. I would write about Charlie's latest milestone, or the ridiculous antics of the night shift security guard, Mike. I learned that Adrian loved classical music, but couldn't listen to it at home because the vibrations of the speakers were too much. I learned that he hated the fluorescent lighting, but kept it on because the dark felt too much like the cramped closet his stepfather used to lock him in. He, in turn, learned about the reality of my life, the struggle, the loss of my brother, the fierce love I had for my nephew. He never mentioned the money again, allowing the exchange to be purely about shared presence in the lonely night. What was most remarkable was the effect I sensed I was having on him. Even though our conversation was mediated by ink and paper, the tension around his shoulders seemed to ease fractionally. His scent, which I could only detect faintly due to his suppressants and my own patch, shifted subtly. The sharp, metallic scent of anxiety that often clung to the air near his office was sometimes, just sometimes, replaced by a deep, earthy calmness. I knew my own scent, lavender and vanilla, was present in the air. I had given up fighting it, letting the faint, comforting omega scent permeate the area around his desk, a constant, gentle presence. I often wondered if that was the real reason the coffee ritual continued. Not for the Kona, but for the invisible, olfactory comfort I provided. One night, the conversation took a sharp turn. I had left a small tin of artisanal herbal tea I couldn't afford to buy, intended as a thank you. He wrote, "Ethan, I appreciate this, but I cannot accept expensive gifts. It crosses a professional line. Please do not jeopardize your position." The note was firm, a definite boundary being reinforced. I panicked, thinking I'd pushed too far. I walked over to his desk, ready to scribble a desperate apology, when I saw the gloves. My industrial cleaning gloves, thick green vinyl, had slipped out of my tool caddy and were lying on the sleek glass surface of his desk, dangerously close to his keyboard. And Adrian, who must have just opened the drawer to retrieve his note card, had accidentally picked them up. He was standing, frozen by his chair, holding the gloves limply between two fingers. His face was pale, his eyes wide with horror, braced for the violent spasm of pain that should have been inevitable. But nothing happened. No arching back. No sweat. No seizure. He slowly lowered the gloves back onto the desk, his gaze dropping to his own hand as if inspecting a foreign object. Then he looked up, his silver eyes wide, not with pain, but with utter astonishment. I realized, in that silent, frozen moment, that this was the first time in years he had touched something that belonged to another person, something permeated entirely by their scent and contact, without immediately reacting. The glove, my glove, the object that smelled faintly of my cleaning solution and my lavender vanilla omega scent, had been touched by the untouchable alpha, and it hadn't hurt him. The silence that followed Adrian's accidental brush with my cleaning gloves was monumental. I watched as the color slowly returned to his face, replaced not by his usual cold control, but by a consuming confusion. He didn't look at me. He stared at the spot where the vinyl had met his skin, as if waiting for a delayed detonation. I knew I shouldn't speak, but my voice came out shaky. "Adrian, are you all right?" He inhaled sharply at the use of his name, a single, tense knot of muscle in his jaw the only visible reaction. He snatched the gloves off the desk, using only the very tips of his fingers this time, and practically threw them into my tool caddy, retreating back into his office without a word. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut, leaving me alone with the realization of what had just happened. For the first time, a boundary had been crossed, and instead of agony, there had only been stillness. For the next few nights, Adrian was absent. His light remained off. I worried relentlessly, fearing I had pushed him too far, that the shock of the non-reaction was worse than the pain itself. The office felt empty without his distant, lonely presence. On the third night of his absence, the executive suite was bustling when I arrived. A small, elegant Omega woman was speaking rapidly into a phone in the reception area, her movements sharp and decisive. Her scent was a clean, crisp citrus, an Alpha's Omega, clearly, given her expensive, tailored clothes and confident demeanor. She noticed me hovering near the supply closet. "Excuse me, you're the cleaner, right? Ethan." I straightened instantly. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. I'm Sophia Castellan, Adrian's sister." She lowered her voice, her eyes, the same silver as Adrian's but warmer, scrutinizing me. "He tells me you're the only person he actually talks to around here." I felt my cheeks flush. We exchanged notes, Miss Castellan." Sophia smiled, a genuine, warm expression that Adrian lacked. "Please, Sophia. And the notes are significant. Adrian never trusts anyone. He especially doesn't trust Omegas. Yet he mentioned your scent." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Lavender and vanilla. He said it makes the room feel less like a cage." My heart hammered. He had noticed. "I'm here because of the glove incident," she continued, serious now. "I work abroad. I'm a TAS researcher, specializing in alpha trauma response. What happened with the glove, the lack of reaction, it confirms my theories." She led me into the small conference room, lowering her voice further. "Adrian's TAS is a psychological manifestation of neurological trauma. The body is protecting the heart. If he feels genuine, profound safety and acceptance from a person, the body's defense mechanism can theoretically be bypassed, even reversed." "You mean he could be cured?" The word felt enormous, terrifying, and full of impossible hope. "A chance, yes. But it requires gradual exposure therapy, starting with the person he trusts most. The first contact has to be initiated with zero fear, total acceptance, and critically, his alpha instinct has to recognize that the source of the touch is protection, not harm." Sophia looked me dead in the eye. "That person, Ethan, is you." I swallowed hard. The responsibility was staggering. "I don't know if I can." "He's terrified," Sophia admitted, her composure cracking slightly. "He knows what it means. It means tearing down the wall that kept him alive as a child. I've told him the risk, but he's already back in his office thinking." I went to my routine that night with a sense of dread and excitement battling inside me. Adrian was back. The light was on. I didn't see him, but his powerful, though suppressed, alpha presence was heavy in the air. I was finishing up my last corridor, near the secondary executive lift, when the relative calm of the floor shattered. A guttural, ugly alpha roar echoed from the hallway leading to the staff exit, the hallway I had to take to leave. I rounded the corner and froze. It was Mark, the lead alpha security guard from the day shift, who was clearly drunk or suppressant-free, standing too close to the lone female Omega receptionist who was waiting for her ride. He had her cornered, one hand slammed aggressively onto the wall beside her head, his aggressive, sour alpha scent filling the confined space. "Just relax, darling," Mark slurred, his voice menacing. My blood ran hot. Instinct took over. I was just an Omega, but I was also Charlie's guardian. I knew how to fight for the helpless. "Get away from her, Mark," I yelled, dropping my mop with a loud clatter that drew his attention. Mark laughed, a nasty, sharp sound. Well, look what the night dragged in. Little Omega cleaner playing hero." He let go of the receptionist, his predatory focus shifting entirely to me. "I smell lavender. You look tired, little thing. Why don't you come here, Anne?" Before he could finish the threat, a massive, furious wave of pure alpha dominance crashed down the hallway. It wasn't the contained, controlled scent of Adrian Castellan I was used to. This was raw, untamed fury, a scent of metal, storm, and absolute power that sent a physical tremor through my body. Adrian appeared from the executive lift, running faster than I'd ever seen him move. He hadn't paused to button his coat or adjust his suppressants. He was a weapon, focused entirely on the threat. Mark, startled by the sheer force of Adrian's scent, stumbled back. "CCO Castellan." "Sir, Adrian didn't speak. He moved past me, his eyes blazing, pain already etching itself into his features. He knew what he was about to do. He knew the agony that awaited him. Adrian grabbed Mark by the shoulder, a direct, skin-on-suit contact. The second his hand connected, Adrian's entire body seized up, a visible full-body spasm that made him groan. But he held on. He didn't let go. He channeled the pain into rage, delivering a short, sharp punch to Mark's jaw that sent the guard reeling back against the wall, unconscious. Adrian stood over Mark, his body shaking violently, his face a sheet of sweat and agony, yet his gaze found mine. In the depths of his silver eyes, there was no fear of the pain, only an intense, silent message. I chose you. I chose to hurt for you. He had broken his most fundamental rule of survival to protect me. The turning point wasn't just about the glove, it was about the sacrifice. The smell of raw ozone and blood was suffocating. I rushed to the receptionist, who was huddled shaking, but physically unharmed. Go. Please, just get out of here. I'll handle the rest. She nodded frantically and fled toward the lift. I turned back to Adrian. He was still standing, his body shuddering uncontrollably, his muscles seizing from the delayed reaction to the touch. The agony was visible in every clenched fiber of his being. He had punched the guard with one hand, and with the other, he was gripping his own arm so tightly his knuckles were white, trying to anchor himself in reality. Adrian. I knelt beside him, keeping a mandated 3-foot distance, unable to touch him, yet desperate to help. It's over. You're safe now. You protected us. He slowly sank to his knees beside the unconscious guard, his breathing ragged gasps. The pain. It's overwhelming. I realized I couldn't move the guard, but I could move Adrian. I didn't dare physically touch him, so I guided him with my voice, using the scent I knew he responded to. I knelt, pushing my soothing lavender vanilla scent towards him, a lifeline in the darkness of his pain. Listen to my voice, Adrian. Focus on the scent. It's safe. Breathe with me. In and out. We need to move. You need your injections. He managed to crawl towards the executive lift while I called Sophia, whispering frantic instructions. By the time she arrived, Adrian was pale but stable, having taken his heavy medication. Mark was long gone, handled discreetly by security personnel. Sophia called in. The next day, Adrian didn't come in, but Sophia did. She sat me down in the conference room, her expression serious. He agreed, she said simply. After what happened, he realizes the wall is crumbling. He protected you, Ethan. He chose pain for safety. That choice is the breakthrough. And so the therapy began. It wasn't clinical. It was personal, agonizingly slow, and conducted in the sterile environment of Adrian's penthouse, where I was sworn to secrecy. We started with the smallest, least threatening interaction. Sitting across the room, just talking, my scent functioning as a non-chemical suppressant. Then came the touch sessions. The first attempt was an hour of just extending our index fingers towards each other. Adrian's hand would shake violently, his breathing shallow. His eyes, those silver fortresses, would plead with me to stop. The fear was a tangible thing. You are safe, I would whisper, my own heart pounding for him. I am safe. We are safe. It's just me, Adrian. It's Ethan. Finally, on the 4th session, our fingers met. It was a brush, the slightest connection of skin to skin. Adrian's entire body went rigid. He cried out, but it was a muffled sound, and it lasted only 2 seconds before the pain subsided. It was a victory, earned through sheer alpha willpower and omega patience. We progressed from finger to finger, to holding hands, mine resting gently on the back of his, never gripping. Every session ended with him exhausted, drenched in sweat, but also with a new, quiet sense of triumph. The day we achieved a hug, 6 weeks into therapy, was the most emotional day of my life. Sophia had left the room. Adrian was standing, his arms stiff at his sides. I need to know you won't pull away if it hurts, he rasped, his eyes shadowed with old fear. I will never let go, I promised. I moved slowly, wrapping my arms gently around his midsection. The contact was instant, and the pain hit him. He gasped, his large frame shuddering. I felt his muscles clench, his mind screaming at him to push me away. But I held firm, pressing my cheek against his shirt, letting my scent envelop him completely. Breathe, Adrian. I'm here. I won't hurt you. I love you. The words slipped out unbidden, whispered into his coat. And then slowly, tentatively, his own arms came up and wrapped around my back. His grip was tentative, trembling, but it was a hold. He leaned into me, burying his face in my hair, trembling not from pain now, but from the sheer, overwhelming release of feeling another human being against him without agony. That night, something else happened. The careful control I exerted over my own body, exhausted by the emotional toll of the therapy, slipped. My own suppressants failed. I went into heat. It wasn't a sudden, violent eruption, but a deep, rolling warmth that pulsed from my core, intensifying my lavender and vanilla scent until it flooded the penthouse. I stumbled, clutching my abdomen, the need for an alpha immediate and agonizing. Adrian, still slightly raw from the day's physical contact, reacted instantly. He rushed toward me, but stopped himself precisely 1 foot away. He saw the panic, the need, and the pain in my eyes. He didn't touch me. He didn't use his alpha voice to command me. He used his heart. He spent the next 3 days caring for me from the perimeter of the room. He brought me water and heat suppressants, placing them just within my reach. He changed the scent diffusers to mask my potent omega scent for the staff, but kept the scent of his own suppressants low so I could still feel the comfort of his presence. He read to me his low, gravelly voice a steadying balm against the chaos in my instincts. He respected my boundaries and my body with a profound gentleness that transcended physical intimacy. When the heat finally passed, and I emerged from the bedroom, drained but clear-headed, Adrian was waiting. The shared vulnerability of the past 3 days, the agonizing physical work of the therapy, followed by the deep, instinctual trust of the heat, had fundamentally changed us. "We don't need to rush this, Adrian," I said, my voice hoarse. "We have time. I'm happy with the slow healing." He stepped closer, his hand outstretched, stopping just inches from mine. This time, there was no fear in his eyes, only resolve and boundless affection. "I love you, Ethan Hart," he stated, his alpha voice low but unwavering. "I love your strength, your kindness, and the safety you give me. I choose this, all of it. I want to build a life with you and Charlie." He didn't need physical contact to convey the weight of his promise. "I want to bond with you," he confirmed, holding my gaze. "A slow bond. A healing bond. Knowing that our journey is just beginning, but we will face every painful step together." I reached out and took his hand, palm to palm. This time, no pain. Only warmth. "Yes, Adrian," I whispered. "Yes. 6 months." It felt like 6 years of quiet, agonizing effort, yet also 6 blindingly fast months of pure, undeniable love. The healing process was not a sudden miracle. It was a daily, patient commitment. But the change in Adrian was staggering. Our bond was slow, exactly as he had promised. It wasn't about the physicality of the mark, but about the constant, unspoken connection between our sense, our minds, and our hearts. I learned to read the slightest flicker of tension in his shoulders, and he learned to trust my smallest gesture of affection. Today, Adrian could touch me. It was still a conscious effort, a tiny hurdle he had to clear mentally every time, but it was effortless compared to the screaming agony of before. He could hold my hand in the car, his thumb tracing slow, soothing circles over my knuckles. He could pull me into a tight, warm hug when he came home from the office. Hugs that used to be a terrifying, impossible dream were now the anchor of my day. "Morning," he murmured, his voice a low rumble, as he kissed the top of my head. We were standing in the kitchen of his sprawling, beautiful penthouse, which was no longer a fortress but our home. I leaned back into his chest, feeling the solid, grounding presence of his alpha body. A body that no longer registered my touch as a threat, but as safety. "Good morning, Adrian. Did you sleep?" "Better than I have in 30 years, he replied simply. "You smell like home." The kitchen had the mixed scent of his deep cedar and rain alpha scent, my soft lavender and vanilla omega scent, and the sweet, powdery scent of baby formula. A high-pitched, happy gurgle came from the sleek, high-tech playpen Adrian had installed. Charlie, now a thriving 13-month-old, was sitting up, batting at a plush toy. Adrian stepped away from me, moving toward the playpen. He knelt, his movements fluid and gentle. "Hello, young man. Did you save any block towers for Uncle Adrian to knock over?" I watched, as I did every day, with a swelling in my chest that sometimes felt too big for my body. Adrian Castellan, the untouchable CEO, was leaning his cheek against the playpen mesh, letting my nephew grab his perfectly tied silk tie and pull it down without flinching. He loved Charlie fiercely, a deep, protective instinct that had replaced the isolation of his former life. He was a father figure, completely devoted to the little Omega, who is now the center of our universe. The merger was complete, and the company was stronger than ever, but Adrian's true work now lay elsewhere. He had stepped back from some of the day-to-day operations, giving him time to focus on a passion project that had grown out of our shared trauma. "I have to leave early," Adrian said, standing and straightening his tie. "Foundation launch is today. Sophia is already there setting up the speakers." I smiled, moving to hand him his briefcase. "You're going to change so many lives, Adrian." "You are." He took the briefcase, and for a moment his eyes, those familiar silver mirrors, softened with profound gratitude. "I wouldn't be doing any of this without you, Ethan. You taught me that you don't need walls to be safe. You just need the right person on your side of the boundary." The Castellan Foundation for Alpha and Omega Trauma, CAT-AO, was launching that afternoon. Its mission was clear: to provide specialized neurological and psychological therapy for individuals suffering from severe trauma-induced touch aversion, particularly survivors of domestic abuse, regardless of their status. Adrian had poured millions into it, using his own story as the powerful, undeniable proof that healing was possible. We drove to the ceremony together, Adrian's hand resting easily on my thigh, a simple, monumental act of alpha comfort. When we arrived, he met the crowd, shook hands with the board members, and gave his speech. He was still professional, still guarded with strangers, but he was no longer an island. He had found his ground. As the sun began to set, painting the city skyline in hues of lavender and gold, we slipped away from the reception. We were driving home, silence comfortable between us, when Adrian pulled the car over onto a quiet overlook. He shifted the car into park, turning in his seat to face me. "We made it, Ethan," he said, his voice husky. "We did," I agreed, my eyes blurring with emotion. He reached out, cupping my cheek gently with his palm. No gloves, no hesitation, no pain. His alpha scent, rich and comforting, filled the air. "This is family," he murmured, his eyes full of the deep, abiding love that had saved us both. Not defined by blood, but by love and care. He didn't need to say more. Our story was not about being rescued, but about rescuing each other. The cleaner and the CEO. The Omega and the untouchable Alpha. We had found a way to share a space, a future, and a touch that healed even the deepest of scars. The scent of his rich alpha pheromones, a blend of cedarwood and rain-washed stone, mixed perfectly with the sweet, milky aroma of Charlie's breakfast. This was the scent of my life now. Not the sterile air of the 45th floor, nor the desperate lavender of my exhaustion, but the complex, warm fragrance of home. It was a quiet Saturday morning, 6 months after the foundation launch. I stood by the kitchen island, easily tossing a block of organic cheddar cheese to Adrian, who caught it mid-air without flinching. He was preparing Charlie's lunchbox, a task he had insisted on taking over, approaching it with the same meticulous focus he used for a multi-million-dollar merger. "I still can't believe you managed to find the exact brand of blueberry yogurt that Charlie prefers," I teased, leaning against the counter, watching the rhythmic ease of his movements. Adrian smiled that rare, breathtaking smile, a smile that only appeared around me and Charlie. "I own a global corporation, Ethan. If I can't find a yogurt pot, what good am I?" I laughed, the sound easy and unburdened. The anxiety that used to be a physical knot in my stomach was gone, replaced by the profound security of his presence. The true victory wasn't just that Adrian could touch me. It was the normalcy of it all. He walked past me, his arm brushing mine, and the contact was effortless, a small burst of electricity, not pain. He knelt by the counter to check the lunchbox contents, and when he rose, he paused, reaching out to gently brush a stray lock of hair off my forehead. The intimacy of the gesture, the sheer confidence in his touch, was still astounding to me. "You look stressed," he noted, his voice dropping slightly. "Just thinking about Mrs. Peterson from downstairs. She keeps trying to organize a neighborhood meet and greet." Adrian chuckled, a deep sound that vibrated through the floor. "Tell her I'm still allergic to large groups of people. I'll stick to running my TAS foundation and being a father." "You are good at being a father," I whispered, walking over to Charlie's high chair. Charlie, now a robust toddler, was attempting to feed himself mashed banana with alarming enthusiasm. Adrian stood beside me, watching. Without speaking, Adrian reached out a hand to rub Charlie's back, a simple, supportive alpha gesture. Then, he rested his other hand lightly on the small, smooth patch of skin on my neck where his bond mark rested, now faded to a silvery scar. It was this moment that crystallized everything: the alpha, the omega, the child. The past pain, the slow healing, the impossible future they had built. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memory of the past 7 months flood in. The desperation of the $1,000 text. The terrifying glimpse of the syringe. The shocking courage when Adrian grabbed Mark's arm, choosing agony for my safety. The terrifying vulnerability of the finger-to-finger sessions. The long, silent nights when our only communication was the shared fear and hope across a wide room. Adrian had been trapped in a lifetime of solitude, his body convinced that love meant hurt. I had been trapped by poverty and the crushing grief of loss, convinced that my worth was only what I could clean. We had both been wrong. Adrian Castellan, the untouchable mogul, was now simply Adrian, my alpha, cleaning banana off my nephew's face, his hand resting on my bond mark, filling our kitchen with the smell of absolute, unshakable safety. Family wasn't just blood and genetics. It was two broken souls deciding to heal each other, welcoming a helpless child into the warmth, and defying the trauma that tried to define them. I looked at Adrian, then at Charlie, then back at Adrian, and smiled. "I love you both," I said. Adrian turned to me, his silver eyes shining not with corporate ambition, but with profound peace. He leaned down and pressed a slow, deliberate kiss to my lips. It was a kiss full of promise, gratitude, and the weight of every boundary we had ever crossed together. It didn't hurt at all. It was home. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss our next video.